Welcome to Develop This, the #1 podcast for economic and community development professionals, with your hosts, Dennis Fraise and Broderick Green.
Well, welcome back to another edition of the Develop This podcast. This is Dennis, and today I'm really excited to be joined by Danielle Casey, the President and CEO of the Albuquerque Regional Economic Alliance. So, Danielle, welcome to Develop This.
Dennis, I have been looking forward to this. I'm one of your biggest fans. I listen to your podcast all the time. I save them, I download them, I listen to them on the plane when I'm working out, which is a lot more rare than when I'm on the plane. But anyway, pleasure to be here.
Well, you're very kind. I appreciate that and having you as a listener. So, Danielle, you've had I think fair to say, an eclectic career. You know, you worked in Scottsdale, Sacramento, now the President and CEO of Albuquerque Regional Alliance. And along the way, you've served as an instructor at the Oklahoma University Economic Development Institute, OUEDI, and you serve on its board of directors. You're a mentor, past president of Arizona Association for Economic Development, and you serve on IDC's governance board. And in 2026, you'll be the chair of IDC. So, Danielle, what I want to know is, what do you do in your spare time?
Apparently, I get old and wake up one day and realize I've been doing this for a while, even though I think for those of us that hopefully we all love this work, you feel like you just started doing it yesterday because it's such exciting work. What do I do in my spare time? I have been very fortunate to have found I was single for a very long time, found a wonderful, lovely husband. They call New Mexico the land of entrapment. It's a bit of a shtick that they throw out there, but I find it to be true. And they say that meaning not that we are trying to entrap people legally, but when you come to New Mexico, you really do fall in love with it, and for some reason find yourself staying even if you maybe didn't intend to. So I found a lovely husband here, and he's really into camping and fly fishing. And while I'm not a fly fisherman, I am perfectly fine with the whole glamping approach. So we've done some really wonderful adventures. We've taken the camper all the way up from Albuquerque to Montana. We did that this summer. Excited to go back with IEDC this coming summer. And my dad was a military guy, but my great uncle was an electrician. So for whatever random reason, I'm pretty handy around the house, and I like to dabble in household electrical repairs to a level that my building inspectors probably wouldn't like. But yeah, I've put in a lot of ceiling fans in my day. So that's what I do.
All right. So you're a dog mom, is that right?
I am. Thank you. Thank you for catching that. Yeah. Sophie the bulldog is busy judging me all the time.
And what's his name?
Sophie. She's if you look at a picture, you'd think it was a boy. She's quite zoftig, but very happy, well fed, and enjoyable. And then my husband came into the mix with a kind of a healer mix who's got a lot of energy, and her name is Percy.
Well, that keeps you guys busy. So, hey, before we start digging into things, talk a little bit about your organization, and maybe give us a little snapshot on how big is your team and kind of the work you guys do.
Yeah, thank you. Albuquerque Regional Economic Alliance. And what's kind of exciting about that is it's a new name for an organization that will be celebrating its 65th year here just starting in a few weeks in 2025. We were a spinoff of the Metro Chamber in 1960. And so we've had previous names through the years First, it was the Industrial Development Services, then it was Albuquerque Industrial Development Services. So they changed the name from AIDS a couple decades ago to Albuquerque Economic Development, which was a little confusing. Folks thought that it was the city's economic development department and not the regional organization that our bylaws always stated. So we made that update and a lot of other changes here in the last couple of years. So it's been an exciting time. Fully staffed, I believe that always includes at least one really awesome intern. We're about 10 folks. Give or take at any given time. But as many of my partners will empathize with, we are a maximum of 45 board members strong. So there's always that caring and feeding aspect and so many different makeups of boards and organizations across the country that we like to talk about.
And you said 45 board members, is that right?
Correct.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah,
well, yeah, not for the faint of heart. That's,
not at
as we
all.
talk about, board relations is an interesting part of our job, obviously. And how big is Albuquerque these days?
Right. Well, Dennis, I like to say we are a little over 1 million because as creative economic developers like to do, I like to drop a pin in downtown Albuquerque and look at a 90-minute drive time. And that just happens to suck in beautiful Santa Fe, the most European city in the country. That's how we like to market it. So that puts us just over 1 million or just shy of 1 million if you don't include Santa Fe, which is about 130,000 folks.
Okay, and what's the economy like there? I mean, do you have manufacturing? Obviously, I would assume there's a fair amount of tourism. I mean, what's that look like?
Boy, I love that you're asking because we've done a lot of research on this. Something I found very, very interesting. When I got the call and sat down and talked to the recruiter and then the community about Albuquerque, frankly, it's not a market I had on my radar or would have thought about. And I've said this over and over, and this is something that we're working on very desperately. Rome wasn't built in a day, so we're giving ourselves the benefit. But I went, what is that about? Why don't I know anything about Greater Albuquerque? I was in the Phoenix market for 20 years. That's where I got my economic development career start. You would think, being kind of an economic developer in the Southwest, I would have a lot of thoughts about it and some really strong impressions. And I think that's one of the beauties of it, but also the big, huge pieces of work before me, my organization, and our state. So when we look at our economy, we actually did. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. I mean, we are the home for nuclear technology and a huge piece of this country's defense operations and military defense. So if you think Oppenheimer, think, Los Alamos, that is the heart and the soul and really the foundation of a huge piece of our economy in this market. Kirtland Air Force Base has 33,000 folks behind the fence. Those are civilian and military personnel. Tremendous operations. But what was wild to me is 2 years ago, we decided to do some initial market research to see what folks thought about our community outside of Greater Albuquerque. And we surveyed through our Business Journal affiliates Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, and LA. And we said, one of the questions that stuck with me the most was, here's a whole list of industries. Which do you most closely affiliate Greater Albuquerque with? And they really identified outdoor recreation, I think, as you just did. And I think aerospace and defense was number 13. And I went, oh my God, it's almost like we've intentionally for decades been keeping this a little bit of a secret. And, I suppose when you deal with a lot of nuclear history, maybe you do that. But we have unbelievable competencies. We've got more agreements than any other state with Sandia National Labs in New Mexico for obvious reasons, but it's a huge piece of our economy. But we have far more than even California. And that's something that nobody even thinks about. When we put that in front of clients, they're kind of shocked. So huge aerospace and defense history and presence now. Because of that, also a large government dependence, which is a challenge. It keeps you stable in the off years, but it keeps you, I think, from really innovating in those challenging ones. And we also are seeing huge upticks for obvious reasons in the Southwest and the desert, and because we actually have a very mild climate, renewable energy. So huge drive in renewable energy, huge benefit to that. We've seen a lot of film industry growth because of a pretty sizable state incentive program. So we are actually the North American headquarters for Netflix. Big presence, more and more sound stages all the time. And but the other industry that we are really working to develop, because when you look at the data and the competencies coming out of facilities like Sandia National Labs, like Los Alamos National Labs, biolife science and healthcare growth potential in our market is significant if we can really ramp up and develop the facilities and infrastructure needed.
Yeah, that's an eclectic mix of things. So you said you're the headquarters of Netflix, is that right?
Yeah, North American, yeah.
Yeah.
Big footprint here.
Yeah, very nice. So, hey, Danielle, what I want to talk about today is finding the right position to keep your economic development career on track. We have a lot of, especially younger economic developers that listen to develop this, and so you've been very successful at finding positions of increased responsibility. Did you have an intentional career path? I mean, as you look back, I mean, sometimes it's like things just work out, but I mean, as you look back and reflect on your career, I mean, you've been able to kind of go from job to job, a couple big jobs, and then, ultimately end up leading Albuquerque. So talk a little bit about that process and maybe the intentionality behind it, if there was.
Boy, Dennis, I would love to say there was. When we talked about teaching courses earlier. When a lot of the courses that I teach, one of them, I teach a portion of OU EDIs, managing EDOs. And I always ask everybody in the room, who is here because you wanted to be an economic developer? And there's one person in the back, right? That's about it. We all seem to stumble into this work, maybe because we're really good at the politics of it, or we're natural born marketers. But what I do find with economic developers is it tends to be people that are good at wearing multiple hats and can be generalists and get into a lot of different pieces of the work. Someone who also has a really great brain for data and analytics, but can also, speak in front of a crowd without completely sweating, but yeah, it was completely on accident. So I guess I'll give you a little bit of this. What's funny, and I will share. I actually have not shared this story with many people because it's actually crazy embarrassing to me. So I know people can't see me on the podcast. I'm kind of really short and petite, and I seem to have a lot of energy. People think I was a cheerleader, and I was such an anti-cheerleader. I was not welcome into that circle. But when I was in middle school, I decided for some reason to compete in the little middle school junior Miss Cover Girl pageant. And somehow I ended up winning, to the dismay of the cheerleaders. It was a very unpopular decision by the judges. But my mother still says that the reason she believes I won is because instead of saying I wanted to be a brain surgeon like Betsy, it was a girl named Betsy. I don't think she became a brain surgeon, but instead of saying I wanted to be a brain surgeon, I told the judges, I really don't know what I want to do, but I do want to go to college and I want to pursue growth and I want to figure out what I'm good at. And I think that's kind of what happened in my career. So my bachelor's degree ended up being in anthropology because I loved people, places, culture, art, museums. Dad would drag me around in museums on weekends. He was a military guy. So I really loved that and got a job in a museum right out of college and thought this is really cool. And about 2 days into it, I realized there's a reason they put me into the marketing and the front desk area because I could interact with people. I did not have any business in curatorial in any way, shape, or form. Just not my deal. So I think you gravitate towards the things that are going to work out for you. But frankly, it is having really amazing opportunities put in front of me. And I think being willing to jump in and be encouraged by wonderful mentors to jump in and really go for it. So even in that first job that had nothing to do with economic development, I had an amazing boss who she intentionally let me try things and fail when she knew it wasn't going to ruin the whole world. She let me get into different areas of the work that were above and beyond my role so that I could learn. So at that museum, I learned fundraising and basic marketing and database management and all of that work. And my work in economic development happened because I wanted a job closer to home. I had done the whole drive till you qualify kind of deal where I wanted to have a house. I wanted to have one of those new starter homes. And the one that, was within the price range was 40 minutes from downtown. And they happened to be incorporating a brand new city. And I got hired on there as an assistant to the city manager because I had been kind of, I just always gravitated towards management. So I was I was like the head waitress and things like that all through school. But that was really amazing. And I'll say from that very start, that was the city of Maricopa, 1,500 people when I moved there, about 5,000 people when I got the job, 45,000 when I left that community 8 years later. And the sheer luck and opportunity that I had, I wish everybody could have that in their career because I think people far more talented than me just maybe didn't get that opportunity. And about 60 days into that role, we were sitting around literally a card table in a double wide trailer, Dennis. That's how we started this community. And they were talking, and the city manager at the time and other leaders said, well, they started mumbling, and they said, well, the city council has hired this woman this high-priced, highfalutin woman to tell them about economic development and create a strategic plan, because this city council really wants to make sure that we direct our community and we have an economy of our own. We're not a bedroom community. And they go, oh yeah, she is just a handful. Danielle, since you're the newest on staff, you have the most capacity. So go do whatever she needs and support her so that the city council's happy on the economic development strategy. And that woman was Ioana Morfesis, who is a fellow IEDC member, if not one of the first, had to have been one of the first female chairs of IEDC. And this is back, around merger times. And she beat the living hell out of me and did more for me in my career than I would ever hope and pray anybody would ever do for someone. So we can talk about Ioana more as we go on, but that really threw me into it. But I do think you also have to be willing to take that mentorship and guidance, right? And in any role you grow in. But what spoke to me about the economic development work is, you were a little bit kind of outside the machine. You could get really creative. You got to interact with people at a high level, but also support small micro businesses if you chose to. So I could clearly go on and on. So, but that's how I got into it to get started.
Yeah, I think most people in economic development kind of have call it a Swiss Army knife set of skills, And so talk a little bit about mentorship. I mean, I think a lot of us I know I've benefited from having a couple of mentors in my life, and you also serve as a mentor. So talk a little bit about how powerful that can be for someone's career.
I will say every place I am and everywhere I am is because of I am so grateful and wouldn't be where I am without multiple mentors that I have. So I can talk about many of them. The biggest thing I struggle with mentorship is, I would say, and maybe it's different for other people, I've never actually been in a mentor match situation where somebody threw me in a room and said, go network, this is your assigned mentor. It's really been because of an employment situation or someone I happened to meet, and there was really just a spark or a match or a need at the time that answered questions I had and moved on in that way. I've got mentors. So personally, I struggle with we're going to say that's your mentor and therefore it is. I really think these things do have to be organic. And I think as a mentee, you have to put just as much work in, if not more, than your mentor that is guiding you and that's there for you. So I talked about Ioana. I had an amazing, the reason I became a CXD and an economic development finance professional, and I finished my master's degree in public administration in the same year, is because the city, a new city manager that came in when I was at the city of Maricopa, and I'd been under the tutelage and guidance of Ioana, learning economic development. And, first thing that happened is they gave me a real economic development title, not just an assistant to the city manager title. And then a gentleman named Kevin Evans came in, who has been a CFD since I know the 90s. He still grades. He is an incredible human. And he came in as the city manager and kind of watched me operate and sized me up. And he said, well, you're going to have a problem because you're going to have a lot of people that have been in city government longer than you have that are going to be threatened by you. And you're going to have to kind of fight that machine. And I've got your back. But you need to get certified and go get it done. And you need to get your mask. So he really pushed me to knock out those credentials early to show on paper that I had what it took. But then he also kept reminding me that the experience piece mattered. I've got a lot of really amazing mentors as well that are colleagues. So, pointing to folks like Anatolio Ubalde, who, when GIS planning, was new and they were really launching great stuff, pulled me in as young leader to talk about some of the creative marketing I had done. So helped prop me up, but also taught me really great skills. Tedra Cheatham showed me around IEDC. Without her, I wouldn't have really engaged with people in a way. I'm actually naturally shy. So all of these folks are really critical, and they have all played a key role. And also one of my biggest mentors, who I worked for in Sacramento for a couple of years, Barry Broom, And I hope he hears this podcast. I'm sure he will. I say this with love, one of the most lunatic people I've ever met, because he has such big vision and ideas. It is hard for the average person, truthfully, and myself included, to keep up with where his brain is going. The man is absolutely incredible. I learned so much from him about fundraising and setting vision, that it has, without that, I would not have been prepared to take this role in Greater Albuquerque. But I knew I was ready after 2 years of him really pushing me in and just putting my feet to the fire.
Yeah, you're right about, or I think the best mentors are, happen organically. And also, just to your point, I think you have to be willing to listen. A good mentor doesn't tell you what you want to hear sometimes. They tell you the unvarnished truth. And I think that's a good thing. So, Danielle, let's talk about, at the beginning, when you're maybe a new economic developer and looking for a position, how do you find the right fit? I mean, we all have kind of eclectic skill sets, but if you were to give some advice to someone maybe that's starting out, how do you find a job that's a good fit for what you want to do, and trying to learn about the organization, because it's hard to know just from what you read and everything else. But I'd just be curious what your thoughts are on that.
Oh, that's such a great question, Dennis. And I have to reflect a little bit. While it wasn't starting in my career, I'll tell you a little. I think explaining when I came to area here, when I came to Greater Albuquerque, kind of that decision-making process, and even going to Sacramento. So some of the changes I've made, gosh, I'll even back up more. When I left my first role in Maricopa and I went to Scottsdale, and I ran economic development for Scottsdale, the reason I did it was twofold. I looked at the city of Maricopa and the program of work that we had built, and I went, they're good for right now. They've got a great strategic plan. They've got a supportive city council. They've got a team that understands it. And this is how I operate now. And I went, they're going to be okay. They need to follow the program of work. I want to get out of my comfort zone and learn things that are going to be intimidating to me. And when I went to Scottsdale, it was a little scary, because I went, oh my gosh, they've had certified economic developers, and I'm still fairly new at being certified. And this community has, a world-class reputation for tourism and other work. Well, when I went there, what I found is they had really kind of decimated their economic development department after the Great Recession. As they had staff attrition, they were not backfilling it with trained professionals. They didn't have a budget or a structure that made sense. So I went, wow. So I think there's the piece of trusting what you have learned and what you know that you add value into the next role, but also intentionally taking roles that are a little scary. So circling back around to coming to Albuquerque, I was very happy in Sacramento working with Barry. We were building an amazing program. They've continued to build an amazing program. And I had no intention of leaving as soon as I did. But when I looked at this opportunity, I went, wow, let me understand the Greater Albuquerque market. And when you look at the data, all the things I told you earlier already in this discussion, really amazing assets. Great history of, we've got more PhDs per capita than our top competitor communities, right? But at the same time, we have less high school graduates. So when you think about disparity there, and you really think about the work of an economic developer, what struck me in this role was the opportunity against many obstacles, because if it was easy, we wouldn't have those challenges, right? We wouldn't have those gaps. You want to do economic development, or at least I want to do economic development, ultimately to make people's lives better, right? I think if you're doing it for personal glory, that's only going to last so long. If you're doing it for the greater good and really trying to enrich people's lives, create greater household income, create better opportunity for future generations, then, hopefully you'll seek out places where your unique skill sets are a great match for what that community needs. So when I looked at the Albuquerque opportunity, I went, wow, my experience in the Phoenix market, my experience spending a little time, New Mexico's got some interesting politics. So, my experience just for a little while in watching California politics, I felt like those things were leading me to be able to be of unique service to this community, not just a seat filler. But that takes intentionality and grappling with a little bit of fear.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like you said, the jobs that you've had and how they led you where you are. But how do you know when the right time is to move on from that next position? Like you said, you weren't necessarily looking for a job, but and do you think is it preferable to work for one organization and kind of work your way up, or work for multiple organizations? I'm not sure there's a right or wrong answer, but I'd just be curious on how do you know when it's the right time to maybe make a move?
Gosh. What I will tell you and anybody listening is none of the moves I ever made were ones that I predicted. So I think you have to be, kind of willing to listen to the universe as it speaks to you, willing to be open to entertaining opportunities, but also realizing, and I do see more and more, I'm noticing younger generations right now are moving to different roles more quickly. And so case in point, when I looked at this market, I actually had and I don't know what the future holds right now, right? I could be here another 10 years. I could be here too. Right now I have absolutely no intention of going anywhere. But when my board talked to me, I remember distinctly 4 years ago coming to Albuquerque, I had a board member that said, well, we hope we can keep you for 5 years. And I said, well, this is just my personal opinion. I said, well, I don't know how I truly make a difference in less than 5 years. If I do that, awesome. Wow. Hooray for me and everybody. But these things do take time. It takes time to move the needle intentionally. It takes time to, really get big initiatives in place that are game changing, right? So not just getting an incentive and closing a deal that maybe has been in the works for a while, but how are you really changing outcomes in the market? How are you really making your market more competitive in a long-term way? Things that we've been working on for several years. So my answer was, I don't know how I really do that in less than 5 years. But also, if I'm here in this seat in 10 years and we haven't seen really big change and you haven't seen big accomplishments, I'd like you to ask me whether I'm still good for this role. And maybe you should ask me to move on. So it was a, I think it goes both ways, but kind of back to my decision coming here, so I'll share a little bit. Hopefully, I don't think I can get in trouble for this now. I've told this to people in presentations, but when I first came to Albuquerque for this role, it was in the middle of COVID. And New Mexico had a rule where if you flew in, you were asked to quarantine for 2 weeks. And I went, well, there's no way in hell that I can make that work, right? So I thought I would do something fancy because I knew that there's also no way I could actually take a job without seeing the community, without driving it and getting a look at it, even if I couldn't, meet a lot of people. So I decided I would be fancy and I would fly from Sacramento to Phoenix, and then I would grab my mom and her Honda CRV and we would drive in. And that's what we did. And I distinctly remember my mother is an incredible human. And we're driving around and I'd had socially distanced coffee with 4 board members. I had the job offer on the table and we were meeting with a real estate agent to look at homes. So I could do a door-to-door move. And I said, if I could find a door-to-door move, I'll do it. They've offered what I want to offer, and I just want to do my final gut check. Can I do this? And I'm driving around with my mother, and I said, Mom, I just don't know. Like, this place is a ghost town. This could be the worst thing ever. They could, and she goes, so, okay, great. What's the worst thing that could happen, if you come here? And I said, well, they could be mean. This town could suck. I could hate the food. I could not get anything done. I could fail miserably. And she said, yeah. So if that happens, you can come live with us. You're cool. You're highly employable. You're skilled. Barry might take you back if you beg him. But what's the best thing that could happen? And I said, wow, I could actually make an impact on people's lives. I could learn a hell of a lot in the process and I could do good things. And she said, well, it sounds to me like the decision is obvious. And like that kind of makes me tear up on the way she really encouraged me to, if you don't take risk, you also have no chance at really the big reward that could be out there.
Yeah, sometimes that leap of faith, is a good thing, right? I mean, it's kind of like, okay, I'm gonna lace them up and do that. So, do you think, Danielle, is there a tipping point where it makes sense to just stay with an organization versus, maybe going to another organization, or at what point do you kind of become like entrenched, so to speak?
Oh, wow. Goodness. I think, it really depends on the uniqueness of the role and the timing. I always tell folks, are you still excited every day? Right. And there are days I will say, in any role I've been in, there are days where you can feel deflated, you can feel beat down, you can feel stressed out, or you go, okay, year 5 or year 6 of the same thing, so we're getting geared up for 2025. You're gonna go, okay, planning another annual dinner, doing another of this. But I like to gauge it on if you have more days when you are inspired and excited than days when you are feeling maybe the obstacles, then that means you've still got the energy and the drive to do that. I also think that being really cognizant of not just making a move because the work is hard, because guess what? The work will be hard anywhere you go. If I believe if you're really kind of fighting the good fight and getting things done. Although if anybody has a role out there where the work is incredibly easy, the whole community gets it, everybody supports it, and there's a massive needle to be moved, please, tell me about that mythical place to do economic development in, because I certainly haven't heard of it, right? So,
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, our jobs are sometimes more political than we might like, and sometimes the winds of change will blow, and people just move on, for whatever reason, whether the organization moves on, and I think that can be sometimes a little bit of a challenge. I mean, I think the high performing organizations that's less likely to happen, but we do serve at the whim of a lot of elected officials.
well, and I kind of alluded to it earlier. I think it's also, um, you know, on us as economic developers and leaders in our communities to also know when it's a good time for the organization to have new leadership. So I'm a huge believer in always having a great succession plan. So if anybody's met Chad Matheson on my team, he is incredible. He is an amazing leader, and I would anticipate and fully expect that either my role here someday or a role commensurate to this one, or whatever he wants to do, he will be ready and prepared to do. But I make it very clear in the community that he's my succession plan at area as we operate today, and that he has my full trust and confidence to handle things here, and just does a wonderful job. But he's having a lot of fun learning all the different aspects of the organization. That I also do think, when I reflect back earlier on my career, I remember, some days I go, boy, that person was really nice to tolerate me, because I was young, I was a little bit of a hothead, and I knew the work, right? I'd taken the test and I'd taken the classes and I had all the ideas, but there's also this balance to experience. And so, it just comes with, I think, age and wisdom and time, and also having a gut to, you mentioned the politics. My goodness, if we don't include that person, this is going to go sideways. Or, the right thing to do to communicate this out of respect is to do it this way. Or so just having that gut, because you've seen things go down in different ways multiple times, there's really no substitute for that. And I think that's what hones in our skills.
Yes, let's talk about, are there red flags when you look at an organization, maybe think about joining it? I know for me, my skill set is one where I enjoy fixing things. Maybe the organization is a little dysfunctional. I like coming in and maybe, just digging in. I know some people would probably rather join a high functioning organization and just kind of take it from good to great. But talk about that a little bit as far as, things you look for or that might scare you away from a position.
Oh yeah, wow. Well, I've looked at information on opportunities, and I wouldn't say scared me away, but ones I have definitely stepped back from, or definitely not considered or wanted to be considered for, were ones that looked like a rinse and repeat of what I'd already done. Right? Kind of going, okay, great. How am I going to learn more? How am I going to be excited? When I It's a really interesting question, Dennis. I empathize with you because I do think I'm a bit of a fixer, and not necessarily a fixer in the sense of that I come in thinking it's broken or I'm looking for something that's broken, but how do we take something to the next level, which could require some pretty significant changes, right? So I think I'm somebody who likes to be able to come into a situation where everything's on the table. And when I interviewed for this role, and I have a huge respect, admiration, and appreciation for my predecessor here in Albuquerque. His name's Gary Tonjes. And what he did, which was beautiful, he was in the role 25 years and decided to retire right before COVID hit. So good for him. There was no correlation. He had already made the decision. Bad for the board having to, like, in the middle of COVID and all of this, also hire and fill a role that had been a constant for a very long time. I do think being a constant for that long can kind of make it hard sometimes to change things that you know you want to change because people know you too well, or you tried that 15 years ago, right? And they're just not going to let you do it for whatever reason. The beautiful thing that Gary did for me, and I will never forget, is I got on a call with him to ask him some questions and kind of get a little bit of handoffs. And I said, well, Gary, I hope I make you proud. And he said, no, she's yours. You take this organization and she's yours now. I give you my full blessing, and you do what you will. What a gentleman. That would be very difficult for so many people after that length of time. Just what grace and kindness. But when I was interviewing with the board for this role, I very intentionally, because I knew it's been around 60 years. You've had somebody in the role 25 years. You've got board members that I can't trace back when they first got on the board. So I asked them very intentionally in the interviews, I said, what can I mess with and what can't I mess with? I really want to know where you all are. And I think it was actually the benefit of them all being on Zoom, because they couldn't really make eye contact or coach each other. And I saw this Brady Bunch screen in front of me, and they all said, we really want you to go for it. We don't want you to come in and offend the community or, do anything that, would just be, highly offensive or intentionally insulting, but of course. But they said, no, we really would like to put everything on the table. We are coming out of the Great Recession, still trailing other markets. And we're trying to figure out COVID, and we're also one of the last to recover from that. Tell us what we need to do. That's why we're hiring you. And I went, all right. And they stood by it. So I think, it could have been a different situation. They could have told me that and not stood by it. But at least I knew coming in that if they hadn't stood by it, I could have called them out on that, right? But I think coming into a role and being comfortable with being very direct from day one is going to be important for anybody.
Yeah, that's great when you have a progressive board like that wants to, I always talk about my board, their mantra is like, we want to put our foot on the gas, right? We want to go. And I think that's a great place to be. So let's talk about, I'm sure you've had the opportunity to interview a number of people to maybe hire for your organization. So are there some do's and don'ts as you become more of a senior leader, when you see people interview things that maybe for the young economic developers, when you're in an interview, maybe some just some thoughts on things to avoid or to do well?
Oh goodness, Dennis, I'm thinking about the Instagram reels I watch when I'm getting ready for bed, which is a terrible habit. There's this one where this gal has all these Gen Z interactions, and anyway, I'll have to send it to you. It's hilarious, but I mean, there's always been generational differences, and so I'm starting to see myself needing to learn and adapt a little more. It is really interesting to me that people will interview in a sweatshirt and a baseball cap. And my answer to that is just, just because you're on camera sitting at home, I need to know what your best looks like. So I do take that into account. I think that if you're going to be in front of clients and really important community members, I need to see in an interview how you're going to represent our organization. Not coming prepared with questions shows a lack of preparation. And I generally will intentionally ask folks what they know about my organization, what materials they've read, because I want to know if they can do their homework. Because if you're an economic developer that doesn't do your homework, then you're only going to have surface level substance. I definitely want to know their long-term, vision, even if that's going to change in their career. So hopefully they're prepared for that. So I think those are really important things. One thing that I think is just such a lost trait that I definitely look for, it does amaze me how few people send either handwritten or even emailed thank you notes. My God, what a lost art, and what a critical art to have. I also noticed that even when we're any role that we're interviewing for, whether it is, an entry level role or higher level otherwise, it's really interesting to me how folks really seem to not take the time to do a custom cover letter or really articulate why they are interested in your organization in particular. And that's what I want to know. And I think, it really comes to how we were taught to hire people. And in my first community in the city of Maricopa, I was taught by, some of our first city managers there that we don't want anybody who hasn't convinced us that they care about this community in particular and this level of service in particular. So I look for that really, really intentionally.
Yeah, I think you're right. I did a podcast on the handwritten thank you. I think it's so important. It's just such a lost art, and it makes me. I'm always very puzzled when people don't follow up with a handwritten note, or at the very least an email. I mean, it's like, come on now.
And Dennis, this is a bit of a hindsight piece, and you always do your best to try to hire great folks. I think it's the easy part is, are they qualified on paper? Based on everything that they're representing and the experience they've had, the project work they're showing you, on paper, are they qualified? From everything that you can tell, do they seem to be qualified to be able to do the work? The real question is, how are they going to adapt to the culture in your organization? What does that look like? And something I have told people, which seems to ring true, it's a little bit about a hindsight piece, is especially if they're new to economic development, what I will tell them during the interviews is, look, if this work speaks to you now, if you truly have a passion for the economic development aspect of improving people's lives and supporting the community, knowing that it is not easy and it is challenging, if it's a government role, everybody knows your job better and they're going to criticize you and tell you how you're overpaid, right? If you're in a nonprofit role, they all want you to tell them what you've done for them lately, right? There's all these aspects. So it is not, you are not on a pedestal and being seen as, something miraculous. You're always kind of fighting to prove your worth and your outcomes. But if you love that and you love that work and you love why you're doing it for the community, either today or you grow to do that, you will love working for me and you will love working in my organization. If that just doesn't speak to you, and it doesn't mean this is a bad individual or a bad employee, it just means it's not their passion, I tell them, you will probably not like it here. You will self-select out, and you may not like me very much, because I wake up every day wanting us to look for the next best thing. Great, we did that before. How do we do even better? How is the next site visit blow our last site visit out of the water? And so I'm a big fan of the kind of the 24-hour rule, right? We blow it out of the park. Let's celebrate like crazy for 24 hours. Let's make sure we know how awesome we are. And if we fail miserably, let's take 24 hours to cry. But after that, no matter what the outcome was, the next thing we're doing is, how do we beat ourselves? Even if we're the best of the best, how do we then, trump that? So
yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. So Daniel, what do you think are the qualities that make a good future leader, a good leader? The things that separate people from that are really good at leadership.
Oh goodness, paying it forward, not being afraid to prop your team and your staff and others up above you and in front of you. The leaders that I'm always the most concerned about are the ones that I don't know what their succession plan is. I don't know who their staff are. I don't see them investing in their teams and in others. So I think that's important. I think there's also a bit of a natural curiosity and a willingness to look at others as best practices. So, when I hear my team coming to me and going, boy, I saw, Louisville do this, or I saw this great program. I really like to figure out how they were successful in that and figure out how we can be better. To me, that really shows that they have a passion for the work. From a leadership standpoint, it's humility. It's being willing to learn from your mistakes as well, and all of those pieces wrapped together. So I mean, there's definitely a big stew that throws in there. I know you've talked to a lot of people about this, so I know you've gotten some great advice from folks on this, but I do think those pieces matter, and knowing that, I don't know, Dennis, I am so grateful and fortunate. It is amazing to me. It hasn't really sunk in that I have the unbelievable honor of coming into vice chair IEDC next year, and then to be in a procession to serve as chair, because so many economic developers I know are far more talented than me, are cooler, have better jokes, all of those things. So I think it's recognizing that, right? And knowing that you're lucky to be where you are, and also reflecting on it and then figuring out how you're creating that for the next folks.
Yeah, that self-awareness is such an important piece, I think, of being a leader, understanding who you are and why you do the things you do. So, Danielle, you've given back a lot of your time, through OUEDI and the Development Organization of Arizona and IDC. Obviously, you're going up through the chairs now, which is no small feat. But you became a certified economic developer. Talk a little bit about the what that's meant for your career. I mean, it's a lot of work to do all those things, but I've always find that giving back has always paid dividends for me in my career. I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Absolutely. Well, another mentor I haven't mentioned yet, Barry Matherly, has been a great supporter and champion for me throughout my career as well. So I wanted to give him a shout out, because he's just retired out of the seat of chairing. He's also an IEDC past chair and an OUEDI now past dean. I don't even know how I've gotten into these things. I think it really came out of, I was willing to raise my hand because I wanted to learn from others, and I wanted to get involved and do things. So I had the fortune of getting onto the IEDC board, because I had been involved in committees and wanted to grow my own skills and meet people. And but that's where I've learned, right? So the amount that I have learned, I will, just by having the opportunity to serve on the IEDC board, now I've been able to surround myself with. So I want to say it's not all agnostic. There's a lot of selfishness in this for me. Mike Langley, what an incredible leader and skilled economic development professional. Had the opportunity to get to know him by serving on the IDC board, as you have, Dennis. And then I was able to bring him in to help facilitate a board retreat with my board leadership, knowing that I had somebody that I emulated and want to be like still in the profession, helping me grow my board. So those things matter tremendously. I becoming certified early on in my career, I always hear from a lot of folks that I'll get the mixed things. From people who have been doing economic development for a long time and aren't certified, they'll go, oh, whatever, I don't need that. Or I think I hear people throughout mixed thoughts on it. What I believe is the training and the things I learned by pursuing certification early in my career were invaluable, because they gave me the knowledge. And I tell everyone, doing the certifications or IDC shows everyone and shows you that you have a fundamental core level understanding of economic development, which means you could do this work in any market, or you can identify and understand any economic developer at a core level in what they're dealing with and what they're working on. Certainly different markets have different areas of focus or specialization, but it gets you to that baseline. And then what you have to grow is your experience and exposure. So that's been huge. I am a huge fan of OUEDI. I actually didn't go through OUEDI myself. I took all my coursework through IEDC in separate classes, and then had the great opportunity to be invited to instruct at OUEDI but I will tell you, growing up as an economic developer, joining IEDC back in would have been 2006, because that's the year I took my basic course in Arizona and joined up at Iowana's, not even insistence, but probably threat of life and limb if I didn't join. So she was a big champion in that, and got my community to fund it and put me through the training. That's another piece. She advocated for them to put me through training. Were it not for her telling my city council to put me through that training, I wouldn't, be right where I am today and have that opportunity. But when I was at IEDC, I noticed that people that had these crazy lifelong friendships for no reason other than IEDC, a lot of them went through OUEDI together, because this becomes your cohort that you go through this training with. And now you have this brain trust and this group of friends. I may or may not have a small tattoo that has a reference to a group of friends of mine through IEDC. We'll just leave it at that. Just shows that I'm willing to win a bet.
Wow, but that's something I didn't know. So that's a little bit.
I know.
That's great. So yeah, I went through OUEDI, and you're right. I mean, I made such good friends going through that. Just a great thing. And when I looked around the landscape, the very best economic developers, in my opinion, were certified. So it kind of was a no-brainer to pursue that. So Danielle, as we finish up, is there anything you wish you had known earlier in your career? I mean, sometimes it's easy to look back and say, I wish I would have known that, because sometimes I would have saved myself some grief, maybe.
Dennis, I was thinking about this the other day, as I'm like waking up with a stiff shoulder and other things. Again, we are all so lucky to get old and grow up in this profession. I would just say, and I would pass on to others, don't be too impatient. It goes by fast. I'm already close to 20 years in this work, pretty much just about hitting 20 years. And that's a significant amount of time. I hope to have another 20 in it. That's the plan, or maybe less, God willing. But maybe I can seek that retirement and really exercise the camper to a greater extent. But truthfully, it goes by quick. So I think really treasure and enjoy the learning opportunities, because I do see when I see a lot of folks, I've seen some really talented folks in the profession that are superstars. Right? They're bright, they get it, they are sharp, they are smart. But I see this kind of lack of patience, and we talk about that a lot. Like, well, I've been doing this for 2 years. Why am I not a director? Or why am I not running that organization? It is okay to, have the time in to gain that experience, because guess what? You're going to close your eyes and you're going to be talking to people saying you've been doing this for 20 years. Enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. So Danielle, I'm going to give you the final word today. What advice do you have for, especially maybe those that are just kind of starting their journey in economic development? Is there any advice you have or you'd like to impart to maybe especially those people that are newer?
Get involved. I mean, hopefully they're involved in IEDC or they've gone through OUEDI. Definitely look for that formal training. But do not be afraid to reach out to a fellow economic developer that you never met or talked to, because you think they're doing something cool and you want some guidance or advice. I have never had an economic developer tell me to pound sand or to, go away because they didn't want to help me or offer something. If you're willing to do that, you'd be amazed at the friendships that you create and you develop, and the maybe unintentional mentors that you find and you meet. So as I mentioned, I have lifelong friends and people that I can go to for advice and guidance all around the country because of these organizations. So reach out, even if it's not in your nature. It was never in my nature naturally to want to do that. I was a shy kid, but also if you get in this work, you kind of have to get over that. I think I've heard you say, Dennis, you're an extroverted introvert. I am the same. It takes intentionality, and I'm exhausted at the end of the week with all the interaction. But make yourself do it, because what you will get out of it is just unbelievable.
Yeah, great words, Danielle. Thank you so much for joining me on Develop This Day. It's been a real pleasure catching up with you.
Absolutely. Dennis, thank you. And I can't wait to see you around IEDC very soon.
Thank you, Danielle. She's Danielle Casey, President and CEO of the Albuquerque Regional Economic Alliance and also the current IEDC Vice Chair. So to our listeners, we're humbled that you keep tuning in every week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to Develop This. Subscribe to our show on Apple or Google Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast. Also, be sure to join the conversation on Facebook and LinkedIn.